Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode one of Kelma B'Kelma, our brand new interview series. My name is Eric. I'm the country representative for University of Malta, and I'm super excited to be launching our first ever branded series in conjunction with Yes Europe. Today, joining me is Dr. Paul Refalo on episode one. Dr. Paul Refalo is a senior lecturer at the Department of Industrial and Manufacturing Engineering at the University of Malta. He is a warranted mechanical engineer by profession, and Dr. Refalo's main research interests include sustainable manufacturing, resource efficiency in the industry, and sustainable water treatment. We have launched this series because we want to give local academics, researchers, activists, economists, campaigners, and politicians a platform to be able to come onto our channel and disseminate objective information, but also give their opinions about current issues and solutions to some of the energy and sustainability issues that pertain our day-to-day living. On that subject, Dr. Refalo, could you describe the mindset that the Maltese public should have towards resource management in the current economic environment and climate that we live in?
Okay, thank you, Eric. First of all, thank you for the invitation and well done for this great initiative because initiatives like this is what disseminates knowledge in this area and will bring people aware of sustainability issues. Well, it's a very good question, and I think one of the first things which have to be kept in mind when we discuss resource management and what people should keep in mind when we discuss resource management is one simple basic thing. It's called life cycle thinking. So resources do have a lifetime. Resources are not infinite. They are not for free. They are extracted from Mother Earth. Mother Earth has a very finite, a limited resource amount of resources that we can extract. And so we have to keep in mind that when we buy, when we consume, when we use resources, they are coming from somewhere, and that somewhere most probably would be at the end of the day planet Earth.
Yeah.
And we only have one planet, right? So we as a population, 8 billion people, we're extracting resources, sometimes overusing resources, and we buy so many things. We buy so many gadgets. We buy so many packaging stuff, so many electrical and technological gadgets, and these consume resources. Then at the end of it, at one point, we would decide that our products, whatever we bought, we consumed, we used, would have reached its end of life. And in English, we say we threw it away. However, we have to keep in mind that there is no away. My away could be someone else's backyard, right? So my away could be the natural habitats where nature lives, when our environment is. So this is what we have to keep in mind: the total life cycle of resources, the total life cycle of the impact on the total life cycle of what we decide to buy and use, and at the end of the day, these resources end up as waste. And so we have to shift that mindset towards what we call life cycle thinking.
So you bring up life cycle thinking, and a growing national and global population therefore requires careful resource management in order to both provide adequately for the consumers and without disturbing an equilibrated variable set for future generations. So therefore, could you describe the mindset and strategy that an individual who officiates public affairs or works within government or works within industry should have about to go about implementing a life cycle thought process towards some of Malta's most treasured natural resources, such as soil, water, limestone, or flora?
Yes, indeed. Whatever the resource is, when we speak of sustainability, there are these like three schools of thought which one has to keep in mind and adopt when coming up with policy, with initiatives, with projects and programs, you name them. There's life cycle thinking, as I said. So resources are extracted from Mother Nature. There's the raw material extraction. There's the manufacturing of goods. Then there's the distribution. So many of the times, components and products, as we well know are shipped around the globe. And so there's the environmental impact behind all that. Then there's the use and maintenance. So we have to, when we come up with initiatives, we have to see how that product and how that initiative or process will be used, will be adopted. And then the end of life. So as I said, we have to always keep in mind that processes and products, you name them, would have an impact at the end of life. But with life cycle thinking, then there are another two. They're called systems thinking, and obviously the famous and popular three-pillar thinking. Now, what is systems thinking? Systems thinking refers to the fact that, I don't want to bore you with the details, but systems thinking is simply telling us that for sustainability to happen, for initiatives to be sustainable, we have to remove our blinkers. We have to think holistically. We have to keep in mind that no man is an island, and so are products and so are initiatives. You cannot just take initiatives and programs and products, even if they are good, if they are renewable or labeled as sustainable. We have to see how these integrate with other systems and the infrastructure, for example. Then there's three-pillar thinking. So when we come up with these initiatives, we have to see how obviously the environmental pillar is impacted, how the social pillar is impacted, so how people are affected. But yet, at the end of the day, we have to come up with initiatives which make financial sense, products which are greener, initiatives which are more socially attractive will never sell if they are not financially feasible and financially attractive. So if there is one suggestion, one recommendation to people working in public affairs, is to keep these three things in mind, these three thoughts in mind when coming up with sustainable policies.
Do you think, therefore, that sustainability, there might be a bit of a misinterpretation of how people gauge the whole concept of sustainability? Maybe there are some obvious examples when it comes to environmental sustainability or energy consumption or financial sustainability, but there are so many more practices and policies which are implemented in the world. Things like media consumption, are our practices for consuming media sustainable, or for consuming fashion or consuming technology? Do you think that there should be this widespread outlook of sustainability rather than just focusing on, I think, some of the more obvious things? What have you seen in your experience with regards to people's mindset towards sustainability?
Yes, true. Sometimes when we speak of sustainability, we think that it's only referring to the environment. And we think it's only referring to some natural habitat in a zoo, or the trees and the North Pole, and you name them, the familiar images that we get when we think of the environment. But as I said, sustainability is not just about the environment. It's a challenging approach that we have to use when coming up with new processes. We have to come up with new ways of how to do what we used to do. So, for example, if we're building buildings, we're building homes, we have to come up with ways which tackle these three pillars: the environment, the social, so how buildings affect people, in a financially feasible way. So yes, sustainability is not about being environmental. It's not just about being green and being eco-friendly and all these buzzwords which we use and abuse, but it's about coming up with new ways of how to do things environmentally benign in an eco-friendly way, but which are still financially feasible, because at the end of the day, industrialists, manufacturers, you name them, are there to make money. So that is the real challenge.
Absolutely. I want to touch a little bit upon natural resources for a little bit, relating back to what we were talking about earlier. And obviously, despite Malta being an island, water consumption and management remains a critical component that requires careful stewardship. as demand grows in a country that seems to move towards desalination, reverse osmosis processes, and obviously importation. So, what could be a feasible and sustainable approach towards stewarding water consumption and management for future generations to come?
Water is a very, very important resource.
Yes.
Water is a vital resource. And so it's one of the most important resources which should be tackled when we have to discuss sustainability. Here in Malta, we have mainly two sources of water. We have groundwater, we extract water from the aquifers, and then we have desalination, we have reverse osmosis. The latest statistics that I saw show that now we have reached a ratio of 2/3 to 1/3, 2:1. So we're getting 2/3 of our water from reverse osmosis and the other third from groundwater. And the reason behind this imbalance between these resources is the simple fact that we don't have enough water. We don't have enough groundwater to abstract. Its quality is deteriorating. So we are extracting too much. And so the salinity of this groundwater increases, so it's deteriorating both in quality and in quantity. So we have to shift to an artificial way of how to produce water. So we get seawater, we desalinate it using reverse osmosis technology, and we produce potable water, which is distributed around the island. But if we had to use life cycle thinking, systems thinking, what I mentioned before, we will see that reverse osmosis would have a carbon footprint.
Sure. Yeah.
Why? Because we need energy to produce it. We need energy to desalinate the seawater. We need chemicals. We need machinery. We need equipment. We need the whole life cycle of processes.
Yeah.
So when we speak of water, we have again to keep in mind that when we open the tap, it's not just water that we're consuming, but there is also the embodied energy in that water, which we're also using indirectly. So we have to come up with ways which reduce the water consumption. Obviously, the obvious water saving measures to do what we're doing with less water. But then there are other initiatives, such as, for example, rainwater harvesting. Now, don't take it that I'm telling you something alternative or something new. Rainwater harvesting is an old, it has been with us for a number of years. It is the law that each household should have a rainwater cistern to store water. But unfortunately, even in Malta, where we don't have enough water to live with, we still don't do it. Many of us don't have a rainwater cistern at home. We don't use rainwater. We don't harvest rainwater enough. And this is why when it rains, we see all the flooding and all the, the familiar, unfortunately, images of whenever it rains, the island, what happens. So that's one obvious way. So whoever is investing in your home would simply check and see whether that apartment, that block of apartments, that maisonette, that terraced house has a cistern or not, whether it's obeying the law, simply as that, or not. Then there are others. So we already have water reuse, wastewater treatment, which is also producing water of good quality for agriculture. And we might also be seeing this in the future applied to grey water treatment. What is grey water? Grey water is the water which comes from showers, baths, wash hand basins, laundry, and this kind of water. We might be seeing in the very, very near future grey water treatment systems which could recycle and provide an opportunity to reuse that water.
Fantastic. So, being a highly experienced engineer, you would know that engineering usually manufactures a solution to the problem. But factoring in viability and timescales, where do you see the island's future when it comes to adapting sustainable energy technologies?
Yes, Another important resource, with water, energy is the other important resource, which has a very high carbon footprint. So when we see where the carbon footprint of globally is coming from, many of the times energy would have a very high impact over there. So when we speak of sustainable energy, there are mainly two ways, if you want, in a very simple way, of how to go about it. There's energy conservation, and there's renewable energy and renewable energy use. But focusing on energy conservation, particularly in industry. I come from the industrial and manufacturing department at the University of Malta. We are trying to find ways and means of how to reduce energy consumption, the energy which is used to produce goods. So we're looking at the processes which consume the most energy. Namely, for example, I don't want to again bore you with any details, but there are processes called injection molding. It's a process which produces plastic products, which consumes a lot of energy. And so we're trying to see where the inefficiencies are, where the energy is being lost, and we're trying to see how to reduce this energy, and not at the expense of increasing the costs, because you would never sell an idea to industry which would just reduce energy, but at a higher financial cost. And together with that, we're also looking at what is called compressed air consumption. Industry widely uses compressed air. Compressed air is air which is compressed at a higher pressure. And to generate compressed air, again, it's one of the most energy consuming processes, in industry.
Yeah.
And if I had to tell you that 30% of that compressed air in industry is lost to leakages, it's just an average. So there are companies which lose less, companies which lose more. So we do have a project right now, and we're tackling these leakages. It might sound very simple, very easy, but believe me, it's not. What they do in industry typically is they just raise the pressure to compensate for that loss in pressure due to a leak, but they just live with it. So they just leave it there. Why? Because it takes time and money and effort to solve it, and it's much cheaper and easier to just raise the pressure and continue producing and leave it there, rather than see how to mitigate and reduce these leaks. So we're trying to come up with an intelligent way. It uses artificial intelligence, and we're trying to locate these leakages in an intelligent way and make it simpler to industry to reduce and eliminate these leaks.
So we've talked about two natural resources, and I'd like to talk a little bit about. I'd like us to talk a little bit about the synthetic resource, which you alluded to briefly. Plastic. Plastic is quite possibly one of the great sort of man-made inventions. It's completely revolutionized industry, domestic environments. However, we all know the problem with plastic. It is non-biodegradable. It's non-degradable. It takes hundreds and thousands of years in various forms to eventually disappear. So Malta being an island surrounded by sea, we've all seen pictures every summer as we're approaching summer of our famous beaches and coastlines. And we're not the only one. There are millions of islands worldwide, and we're all affected by similar aspects. So I'd like to ask you about whether Malta has the acceptable infrastructure in place to manage plastic importation. Obviously, the importation of plastic is quite possibly what accounts for the largest amounts of plastic issues in Malta. So not just plastic importation, but also consumption in the country. And is enough being suggested from our policymakers on reducing its usage? We all know that about the famous 3 Rs, and reducing is by far the most effective one. Reusing and recycling, recycling especially, is incredibly energy intensive, and I think people would usually So it might be the most convenient thing for them to recycle, to put their plastic content in recycling bins, because they know that for them they're sort of kicking a can in somebody else's backyard to deal with. But holistically, as a society, as humanity, as a planet, if I'm not doing it, then somebody else is, and it's still consuming the same amount of energy. So reducing is by far the best solution for us. So what is your sort of opinion on what's happening in water?
Yes, there are the three R's: the reduce, the reuse, and the recycle. We have to find ways which eliminate plastic. When it comes to plastic, many of it is used for packaging. So we do have, right, anything, food, beverages, technological goods, you name them, packaged in plastic. And so we have to come up with ways which do this without excessive packaging. Earlier on, we discussed life cycle thinking, and we went through the main life cycle stages of a product: raw material extraction, manufacturing, distribution, and use. But we skipped one particular phase, which I also discussed with students when we discussed this at university. Unfortunately, now there's this unboxing stage, which is gaining popularity. Unboxing means that you expect to have a package. And if it's an unboxing phase, which we see on social media, we see on Instagram and Facebook and wherever, means that we do expect good packaging, aesthetically pleasing packaging, and that is not a sustainable way of how to go about it. We would prefer a product with no unboxing required, right? Sometimes it's just the product which we need, and we won't be making any further use of packaging. However, packaging is with us and will remain with us. And when it comes to plastic packaging, now manufacturers are using also recycled plastic when they produce plastic packages. Around about 25% of the plastic packages they produce now comes from, they use recycled packaging. But you mentioned another important R, which is recycling. So it is very important that whenever we use, whenever we have this plastic packaging and we throw it away somewhere, which we call away, it's important that we separate waste. And it sounds as if I'm saying something new. No, we've known this for a number of years. However, as an island, we weren't doing it. And that is why we have with us now what is called the beverage containing recycling system. Why did the country need to adopt such a system? Why have other countries also implemented this? Because people weren't separating enough waste. Sometimes we refer to it as recycling.
Yes.
It's not recycling. We just
Separation.
we just separate waste and then we dispose it properly.
Yes.
So this beverage container recycling system is trying to incentivize people to dispose of waste, packaging waste mainly, properly, as it should be. Now, is the system good enough? Can it be improved? Of course. Of course. Unfortunately, those people who were already separating their waste have to use the same system. Unfortunately, they were doing something which was and still is good, but now they have to use the beverage recycling system as the others. But at least this system will serve as will incentivize people who weren't separating waste, so that this waste eventually would have an opportunity to be recycled, because that is the whole intention. So when we separate waste, that plastic waste will become a resource, and we would be giving it a second chance. So eventually, it would go through a mechanical and chemical process, which makes it viable to be used again in a second life cycle.
Packaging and film coating is definitely the curious one, because I think when people think about plastic recycling, it goes back to that other thing about having an obvious image in your head about bottles, caps, boxes. But if you think about what we've just experienced in the past 3 years with the pandemic, and how many things have to have been delivered to us, rather than us, for example, going to an open market and sourcing what we need to. We have home deliveries. And if you think about it, probably worldwide, packaging, film coating, all of the kind of soft plastic, which is obviously definitely single-use bags, probably equates to more in terms of like per gram in plastic production and consumption rather than the obvious things which might be heavier like bottles and caps. I think there was a solution. I don't know if you ever heard about DIY food kits. So during the pandemic, any restaurants that were closed would introduce something called a DIY food kit. So they would deliver the raw ingredients to somebody's house, and they would sort of be able to prepare what would be restaurant quality food at home for a similar price level. So instead of getting a takeaway, they'd get that. And they'd always, usually restaurants would encourage people to reuse plastic boxes or deliver them back to the restaurant, etc., to re-clean. It also relates back to that thing that we talked about earlier about engineering usually manufactures a solution to the problem. But whenever you find a solution, it might create a new problem. And then you always have a trickle down of, okay, I found one solution to one problem, but now I have 5 smaller problems, which require 5 more mini solutions. And you keep on breaking down this box into smaller things. And eventually you have 100 problems, which require 100 unique solutions. And it becomes a little bit too energy intensive to think about 100 unique solutions. And you go, well, 100 plastic packages, what damage could 100 plastic packages do? But we are 8 billion people on the planet, and it's only getting more. And you'd imagine in developed countries, this is less of an issue because we have the resources to find solutions to problems. But in developing countries, which is over half of the world, they don't have the resources. For them, things like plastic bags, film coatings are incredibly important for their industry, and it does seem to be a little bit worrying. But I think it comes back to about having a mindset for wanting to implement a change rather than actually having tangible resources sometimes.
What you're referring to, Eric, is called systems thinking. So you come up with one solution or a potential solution, and you would find out that that same solution created 5 problems. And that is exactly what systems thinking is about. So you wouldn't go and just implement your solution if it outweighs the other problems which it's causing or creating.
So yeah.
So that is what systems thinking is all about. You would see what and how all these elements are connected to each other and what the real impact would be.
So we'd like to set a trend with this series where we end every interview with a similarly themed question. So for anybody who's never heard about Yes Europe before, YES is an abbreviation for Young Leaders in Energy and Sustainability. We are a youth organization. Our aim is to empower and platform younger generations to start discourse about various matters as we are doing today. So I want to ask a question about younger generations, about how promising the future could be for them and them being the leaders of tomorrow. So obviously we live in a world with unpredictable parameters and circumstances, and it's always important to look at things holistically. So should younger generations prioritize critical evaluation and out-of-the-box thinking to be able to solve complex problems in an abstract way, obviously, or should trusting the process that has been followed for kind of decades and centuries and doesn't seem to, I guess, have obvious cracks in the system, should that be the way to go, or should we completely revolutionize, take to the streets to change the way that we think? How do you think we should kind of transition our way into the future?
Very interesting question, and as usual, the younger generations should be catalysts for change, right? Now you mentioned out of the box thinking, or whether and how that relates to the obvious solutions. When it comes to sustainability, fortunately, we do have a lot of solutions. We know what should be done, but we're just not doing it enough. Many of the solutions are in the box. So we need a push, we need an initiative to have these in the box solutions implemented. So yes, it might be something which the younger generations should take and just adopt what we already know. Have it implemented, push towards having these in-the-box solutions implemented. But then, yes, there are issues which we still have to solve, we still have to find solutions for. And those, yes, would then require out-of-the-box thinking, would need innovation, would need someone fresh to think about this problem. I think it was Einstein who said this. We have to come up with solutions in a different way, which we created them. So we need someone fresh and someone looking at it in a different way to find solutions to these sustainable issues. But many of the times, we would know what needs to be done, and the challenge is to do it in a financially feasible way.
Sure. Yeah.
So if I had to give one idea or recommendation, would be to find ways of how to implement what we already know in a financially feasible way, in a cheaper manner, because that is one of the most promising ways of how to get industrialists, people investing to adopt these technologies and adopt these solutions. So yes, implement what we know, find ways of how to implement them in a financially feasible way, and then eventually think about the problems of the future, because people eventually making money in the future, businesses making money in the future, would be those addressing the problems and the issues of the future. So that should be one of the problems which incentivize and promote younger generations to think about sustainability and come up with new initiatives.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Refalo. It's been a big pleasure to have you on board for our first episode. And I'd like to thank anybody who's been listening to us. We've been Yes You Reporter. This has been our first episode of Kelma B'Kelma. Please like and share our content. We'd greatly appreciate it, and recommend us to everyone that you know. And thank you once again, Dr. Refalo, for your time.
Thank you for your time and for this great initiative.
Thank you.